Some believed that amongst all things beautiful, nothing shone as brightly as love. However, it was not so for the man. He was convinced that love was sin. The man had held this opinion until today. Now he was doomed to eternal suffering. The blonde man was incredibly sick of it all. The guy tried to run as hard as he could. His face was covered with abrasions, and a man came out to meet the brunette and scared the guy, making him run backwards. The man flung the guy to the floor, pouncing on him with kisses. The brunette was really trying to escape. He was disgusted by the actions of the brown-haired man. The brunette asked the man to stop, but he only ordered him not to kick. The guy realized that he had to run, so when he noticed a table lamp nearby, he grabbed it and with all his might hit the brown-haired man on the head. The guy felt a wild terror. He, without stopping running, wondered if the man was alive. At the thought that the brown-haired man had survived, the brunette froze, stopping on the bridge. The brunette realized that the man would continue to pursue him. He sighed heavily and leaned on the railing, thinking about how he was sick of it all. Feeling wildly tired, the boy climbed the fence and, with tears in his eyes, thought about the fact that the whole nightmare would end if he disappeared. The guy was staring off into the distance, thinking about how this was all so unfair. Suddenly, there was a squeak of wheels behind the brunette's back, followed by a question about his being here. After removing his helmet, the man informed him that the guy's actions were dangerous and ordered the brunette to get down quickly. But the guy staggered, which made the blonde man indignant that he might fall if he continued to do so. The brunette turned to the man fearfully and stammered and asked who he was. The blonde man gave the guy a silent glance, then remarked that the guy had obviously gotten a pretty good beating. The guy wasn't going down. The blonde tiredly covered his eyes. He didn't interfere in situations like this, and thought about how the brunette had only caught his eye for nothing. The man reminded the guy that his parents would be very upset if he jumped, to which the brunette frowned and informed them they were absent. The blonde coughed awkwardly before replying that his life should be valued. The brunette didn't understand why this man was picking on him or what he wanted. After asking the guy if he had calmed down, the man promised to listen to him and, once again, offered to go downstairs. To the brunette, the stranger seemed strange but not dangerous. The guy started to climb down, thinking that most likely nothing terrible would happen. The blonde stretched his arms forward to help the brunette down. Suddenly, the brunette slipped, and as he fell into the water, he wondered if this was the end of him. The blonde thought to himself that there was a reason he had been worried and jumped in after him. The lad was meekly dropping down, when suddenly, widening his eyes with surprise, he saw the stranger, with wings behind him, flying directly behind him, with his arms stretched forward. The blonde grabbed the brunette's wrist tightly, pulling him into his arms, the boy looking at his savior with tears in his eyes. He realized he wanted to live. The brunette trembled as he tucked himself into Angel's shoulder. The blonde made sure the guy didn't want to die at all. The man picked the guy up in his arms and flew away with thoughts of how people were always a lot of trouble. As soon as the angel lowered the guy, holding him gently, the brunette shoved the man firmly in the chest, demanding an explanation of who he was. The man was amazed at this reaction of the guy. He clarified if this was the way to treat his savior. The brunette shouted that he didn't ask for it, and the blonde decided everything on his own. Angel, looking directly into the eyes of the brunette, asked him not to lie, because the guy wanted to live. The brunette looked at the man with horror, who asked if he would fulfill one of his wishes, as a thank you. The brunette didn't understand what the man wanted from him, but the blonde asked if he could kiss the guy, and without waiting for an answer, decisively joined their lips in a kiss. Unable to break the kiss, the brunette thought the man was not non-threatening, but crazy and so strong that it was simply impossible to push him away. The blonde pulled away from the guy's lips and, with a predatory lick, informed the brunette that he wasn't bad, then offered to kiss again. The brunette tried to resist, cocking his head to the side, the thought swirling in his head that he was just as driven as the man who was chasing him. Gathering all his strength, the guy slapped the blonde on the cheek, which came as a surprise to the man. The angel took stock of how strong the brunette's arm was. Angel was outraged that he tried his best to save the guy, and the guy hit him. The man squeezed the guy's cheeks, ordering him to look him in the eye. The guys looked into each other's eyes, however. To Angel's surprise, the guy was not affected by his gaze. The blonde let go of the brunette, and the latter, pulling back as far as possible, coughed. The brunette didn't understand why the man had saved him if he was going to hurt him now. The guy promised not to say anything else. Considering the blonde had saved him, then clarified if it was time for the man to leave. The blonde turned around, about to leave, when he suddenly froze when he heard the brunette thanking him for his rescue. Putting his helmet on, the blonde smirked at the fact that the guy had decided to do it just now, then left, saying one last word about them seeing each other again, which made the brunette resentful. The brunette didn't want to go home and was thinking about what day he should do. His phone vibrated, notifying him of an incoming call from Cha Shanu. Cha Shanu greeted the brunette with a smile, to which the brunette apologized for such a late visit. The blonde didn't care at all. He wondered what was wrong with his friend's face, and if that was the reason he wasn't picking up the phone. The brunette informed that something had happened and promised to tell everything later. Citing his poor condition, the blonde didn't insist. Cha Shanu offered the brunette a warm bath, to which he agreed, the blonde asking him to wait a bit while he brought his friend a change of clothes. The blonde man left, and the guy started to look at his friend's house he was in for the first time. The brunette was embarrassed that he had come in this way, and also so suddenly. The guy swept up that his friend lived in a very nice place. Cha Shanu appeared from behind, slightly startling the brunette. The blonde handed over a change of clothes and informed him that the guy could wash up leisurely. The brunette thanked his friend. The blonde threw an attentive glance at the guy and then, slightly embarrassed, suggested that the guy buy him lunch if he was really grateful. The guy was lying in the bathtub and thinking over everything that had happened today. At the end of his thoughts, the brunette reached the kissing scene, which made his eyes open wider. The brunette pulled himself out of the water and leaned against the side of the tub, thinking about how grateful he was to the stranger for saving him. But that didn't allow him to do as he pleased. The boy was unsure if the man was human, given his wings behind his back. The brunette didn't understand what the blonde's words meant about them seeing each other again. Suddenly, the guy noticed a tattoo in the form of 2 wings on his wrist. The brunette was surprised by its appearance and tried to rub it off, but it had no effect. The brunette was brought out of his thoughts by the voice of his friend, who, slightly worried, clarified whether everything was fine, after which the guy hurriedly left the bathroom. Cha Shanu, lying in the same bed as his friend, informed him that due to the lack of a guest room, a slight inconvenience in the form of cramped quarters would have to be tolerated, but the brunette was very grateful to be able to sleep in such a place. Awkwardly squirming in his seat, the brunette turned to his friend, thanking him for listening to him with many questions and not asking anything. Shinu waved it off, replying that it was fine and suggested going to bed, hinting at the brunette's tiredness, after which, after wishing each other a good night, the guys fell asleep. The brunette dreamed that something very warm was lying next to him. The guy felt kisses on his neck. Then he opened his eyes and saw the face of a stranger. The guy woke up, breathing heavily and not understanding what happened. Blushing, the boy covered his mouth with his hand, embarrassed to think about the fact that he had dreamed about a complete stranger over a mere kiss. The brunette froze, not realizing if he really liked that kiss that much, as he suddenly noticed the note that was under the guy's phone. The note that Shinu left behind said that the guy himself was gone, and there was a breakfast on the table that the guy had made for the brunette. The boy realized that he couldn't stay indebted to Cha Shinu any longer. Having noticed how overly kind his friend was, the brunette decided that this was all taking too long. The brunette ran across the bridge, not sure what he was thinking when he came here yesterday. The guy looked down and realized that he must have really been out of his mind considering how high it was up here. The guy involuntarily thought that if it wasn't for that stranger, he would probably be dead by now. A familiar voice came from outside, and the brunette turned around, frozen with surprise. In front of the guy stood a blonde man with a candy in his mouth, who, when asked how he was here, replied with a smile that he had already warned about their next meeting. The blonde asked about the guy's feelings about being in this place, remarking that it was insanely high and deep, and then clarified if the brunette was grateful to him now. The brunette only asked who the man really was. The blonde glanced at the guy's tattoo, thinking about the need to tell him everything. The blonde man revealed that he was an angel, but because of one story he was incomplete, the brunette didn't understand how that was possible, so he assumed the man was a fallen angel. Angel stopped gnawing on the candy and turned to the boy with slight surprise, informing him that he was smart enough if he could guess that. The brunette, however, didn't believe his guess was true. The brunette involuntarily stared at the man licking the candy and remembered his dream, which made him blush for a moment, realizing that he couldn't take his eyes off the blonde's lips. Angel clarified why the guy was looking at his lips like that, and smiling slyly suggested that maybe the brunette liked what had happened yesterday. The boy blushed again, afraid that the angel might know about the dream he'd had. The man clarified that he was talking about the kiss, which caused the brunette to exhale in relief. The brunette covered his mouth with his hand when he realized that they had actually kissed yesterday. Angel chuckled slightly when he heard about the dream and stated that obviously the guy had really enjoyed last night. Stepping closer to the guy, the blonde asked if he wanted to do it again, but the brunette only asked the man not to ramble, which caused the angel to laugh. The guy didn't understand this reaction to his words. The man lightly stretched and reported fatigue due to a lot of wasted energy, thanks to one person alluding to the brunette. Angel hovered slightly, looking up at the sun and thinking about how tired he really was. The brunette suddenly began his tale of stalking, causing the blonde to snap out of his trance and turn in his direction. The brunette said his stalker was a classmate who had bullied the guy since high school due to his lack of parents and interest in men. The guy, right after graduation, went to the army. He tried to justify his classmate's actions with age. The brunette's hands trembled as he reported the continued bullying at uni. The brunette changed his number, but the stalker was able to find out not only his number, but also the guy's address, after which he started coming to his house relentlessly. The guy reported it to the police, after which the stalker, enraged, came home to the brunette again and plopped him on the floor. The thought provoked horror at the realization of what would happen if he came back again. Clutching his head, the brunette, horrified, remembered how yesterday he had hit the stalker on the head, afraid that he might die. The guy resolutely stated that he had to go to the police. The blonde interrupted the guy without letting him finish and told him he might not continue, whereupon the man clarified if the brunette wanted him to deal with his stalker if he was still alive. The brunette didn't understand why the blonde man wanted to do this. The man only spread his hands, informing him that he was kind and was also an angel. But his favor was not free. In return, the angel asked the guy to give him his soul, which made the brunette think that now it was clear why the blonde had been cast down. But the man clarified that he didn't need the whole soul, but only a part of it. The boy thought that because of yesterday, he clearly seemed like a simpleton to the angel. But the blonde objected that he wasn't, clarifying that his abilities didn't seem to work on the brunette at all. The brunette decided to ask what would happen if he refused the angel's offer, to which he replied about the possible repetition of such a situation, which caused even more fear in the guy. The boy was afraid that Jawan could break into his house again, sure that this time his stalker would not leave him alone. But the brunette was no less afraid to trust the angel. The brunette realized that this was his last chance to get rid of Jawan. The guy wanted to believe the man, but was afraid of seeming too flippant, even though he realized that the man had saved him. The guy didn't know what to do. The man saw the brunette's confused look and smirked and grabbed the man's hand, stating that the pact had already been made with a kiss. Surprised by this answer, the brunette decided to clarify how the angel would take his soul. The blonde came closer to the brunette's face and informed him that he would take his soul through a kiss. Angel explained about the tag on the guy's wrist that shows the man his location, because of which the brunette could not worry about the stalker. The boy excitedly asked what would happen if the angel couldn't protect him, but the man confidently stated that it wouldn't happen, because then he would have no one to kiss. The man approached the guy's lips and asked if he wanted to check if the contract was concluded, to which the brunette decided not to resist, knowing that the angel would still get his way, after which the blonde kissed the guy. The angel's words of help were lies. After the exorcism, the man was still as good as dead. He needed a human soul to continue living. According to the contract, the guy was helping the man. The blonde continued kissing the brunette, gently touching his tattoo, then broke the kiss, calling the contract not bad. The brunette looked confused at the blonde, who, noticing that he was salivating, began to wipe his lips. The guy was about to leave, when suddenly the angel asked for his name. The guy thought that he was crazy. Otherwise, he could not explain what he had done. If yesterday everything could be written off to his condition, then today the brunette was as if possessed. Behind the brunette's back appeared a blonde man who insistently asked him for his name. The guy covered his face with his hand and tiredly thought about why this angel was following him. The brunette wondered if it was possible for an angel to fly like that, considering how many people were around. But the man assured the guy that right now, no one could see him but him. The guy didn't understand why the angel was chasing him, The man, however, thought it would be offensive if the brunette left without telling him his name or his number. Pointing to the tattoo, the guy recalled the angel's words about location, to which the man countered that it was different and clarified that they were now closer and should see each other all the time. It seemed strange for the man to keep addressing the guy without knowing his name. The brunette was stirred up by the words about intimacy, so he asked Angel to terminate the contract if he continued to talk nonsense, pointing out that it would only get worse from the termination of the contract. The blonde clarified, "Really, the guy really wants it?" The brunette got angry over the man's words, and then thought about it. Angel smirked. He wasn't going to break the contract. After all, the man couldn't miss this guy who was the very salvation the blonde had been looking for so long. The guy called out a name, Ryu Ha-jin, and walked past the angel who didn't expect to hear an answer to his question. The man noticed that the name was fitting for the brunette. Ryu Ha-jin asked what that meant. The blonde waved it off, saying it was hard to explain. The brunette asked what the angel's name was, to which he received the answer, Kale. The brunette didn't understand why the angel wanted his soul. The man explained that it was some sort of payment for a favor. Ryu Ha-jin resented the way the blonde spoke of human life. The boys approached the door and the brunette froze, alerting the blonde that this was where his home was. Hesitating, Ryu Ha-jin grabbed the handle, hesitant to open the door. The blonde tried to hurry the boy, but he was shaking. His body was not obeying him. The brunette was afraid to see Woo Jae-hwan outside the door, especially if he was dead. Placing his hand on the boy's arm, the man noticed the door was unlocked and opened it, the angel taking note of the mess that was going on in the apartment, suggesting Woo Jae-hwan's wild anger. The brunette walked over to the bed where the bloody lamp was left lying. The guy was surprised that Woo Jae-hwan was still alive even after something like this. Ha-jin was afraid that the stalker would come back again. The blonde dropped to the bed and propped himself up on one elbow. Noting that the guy had survived, Angel clarified with the brunette what he would do if he came back. Ha-jin realized that the man was provoking him. He looked angrily at the blonde, who, in turn, asked the guy not to look at him like that, and wondered if the brunette could live here. The brunette said he had nowhere else to go. He motioned for the man to move over to start cleaning up, as the blonde suddenly grabbed the guy's arm and pulled him into his lap. Angel offered to let Ha-jin stay at his place, explaining that they were in a relationship that involved kissing, so it would be a good idea to live together, which angered the brunette, who picked up a pillow and started hitting the blonde. After a while, the guy was standing in the man's apartment. Despite all his indignation, Angel told the brunette to make himself at home and headed for the shower. The brunette wondered what kind of angel he was, since he was living so well. The guy thought about the fact that maybe the man had succeeded with dirty money or something similar. The brunette was pulled out of his thoughts by the blonde man's question about whether he was going to go wash. Turning around, the guy directed a cold stare at the man who was in a single towel. Ha-jin asked Kale to get dressed, to which he brushed off that this was his house, so it was fine. The brunette embarrassedly muttered that that wasn't the problem at all. Smiling, the blonde noticed the confusion on the boy's face. Kale asked Ha-jin if he remembered his recent dream. The brunette tried to lie that it wasn't like that. Kale thought it was all about the boy's recent dream, so he moved closer, spreading his arms at the brunette's sides and, with a predatory grin, asked him to sleep with him tonight. The boy looked away embarrassed, clarifying why he had to do what the man had asked him to do. The angel threw a questioning look at Ha-jin and then jumped up, informing him that he had meant completely differently than he had thought. A smile blossomed on the blonde man's face. He informed him that he couldn't help but think in that vein now. The man had seen how shaken the guy was in his apartment, so he figured Ha-jin would be scared in an unfamiliar place. Approaching the guy, Kale admitted that he hadn't expected the guy to have such dirty thoughts. Ha-jin pushed the angel away and objected that it was his fault, since the angel had expressed himself in a completely weird way. Not the first time he had been punched in the face, Kale promised to bind his hands. Ha-jin calmed down and said he needed to wash up. Looking after the brunette, the angel noticed his complex character. Kale collapsed on the couch, thinking about the fact that this was the first time he had brought someone into his home. He listened to how he felt and realized he felt a little strange. Ha-jin stood in the shower thinking he had lost his mind. The guy had only one thought in his head because of his dream. The brunette was trying to blame everything on the blonde and his sudden semi-naked appearance. Images of the angel's naked body surfaced in his subconscious, which the brunette thought was in great shape. Hajin flashed back to such a sudden thought, deciding he needed to wash up. Angel looked into the guy's bathroom and hurried him to eat as soon as possible. The brunette was angered by the man's act, so he called the blonde a pervert and threw a couple punches at him. Hajin calmly ate the prepared food while Kale, with a bump on his forehead, resented the guy's act, not understanding how the brunette could eat so calmly after beating the man. Once again, the angel decided to remind the boy of his life, which now depended entirely on him. Hajin looked menacingly at Kale and clarified who gave him permission to swing the door so wide open. The man objected that the guy himself had not locked the door, to which the brunette was even more indignant, explaining that if there was someone inside the bathtub, in that case, the door should not be opened. In all seriousness, Kale stated that if the guy continued to spread his arms, the man would indeed tie them up. Hajin threatened the blonde with a spoon, to which the man only pretended to be scared. There was a silence, which was soon broken by the angel telling the boy to eat more. Despite his beautiful but too thin body, Hajin kept his promise and threw a spoon at Kale. After getting full, the angel decided to watch a movie and offered the guy to join. However, the brunette decided to go to bed, asking about the room he could have. The blonde felt that the guy was now completely naked, to which Hajin reminded the man of his words about making the brunette feel at home. Smirking slightly, the angel noted that the brunette looked like he was very uncomfortable. Hajin assured her that it was much stranger to be in someone else's home and feel comfortable. The boy realized that he was having strange thoughts when he was around Kale, as if the man was trying to wind him up. The angel informed the brunette that he could use the room on the second floor. Turning around to head for the right room, the boy was stopped by the man's phrase about having to pay for lodging. Hajin chastised himself for thinking as if everything was free. Hajin asked Kale if he could pay in installments, to which the man asked the guy to move closer to him, and then said he hadn't brought the brunette here to take money. Loafing around on the couch, the blonde ordered the boy to kiss him. The brunette thought Kale was holding him for a fool after all, and reminded him of their recent afternoon kiss. The man explained that there had been a charge during the day and now there was a charge. The brunette hesitantly moved closer to the blonde and decided to bear with it until the angel was rid of Jawan. Angel wondered why the guy was standing, and ordered him to sit on his lap. The brunette carefully positioned himself on the man's lap, clarifying that he had sat down correctly. Wrapping his arms around Hajin's waist, Kale pulled him closer to him and kissed him. The brunette didn't realize how long he would need to do this with the man. The blonde flopped the boy on the bed, deepening the kiss, making it hard for the brunette to breathe. Unexpectedly, Kale offered Hajin a quicker way to find and protect him. The man assured that such a method would help to deal with the guy's stalker sooner, specifying that their bond should become even stronger, persuading Hajin to agree to it. Nibbling on the guy's neck, the man informed him that if the guy agreed to intimacy with the blonde, he could take more of his soul and get rid of Jawan quickly. Angel realized that all the words he said were lies. His soul could only be taken away through a kiss, but the blonde's desire to tease the brunette was far beyond him. The flushed boy asked the man what, in that case, was the difference between him and Jawan himself. Kale explained that he was trying to help Hajin and had even asked his permission. Hajin decided to clarify one last time whether the man would definitely be able to deal with Jawan more quickly if he agreed to the blonde's offer, to which Kale replied in the affirmative. The guy inarticulately gave his consent, after which the man grabbed him by the cheeks and demanded to say all the words again, but more clearly getting what he wanted. The angel fell into the brunette's lips with a kiss. Kale and Hajin continued to have fun, the man kissing the guy's body before removing the rest of his clothes and undressing himself as he continued to pleasure the brunette. The brunette felt unprecedented pleasure. The man could not tear himself away from Hajin's body, finding it very beautiful and cute. Reaching the finish line, the guy fell on the bed without strength. Sitting outside, Hajin thought about how all of yesterday's events seemed to be a lie. The guy couldn't remember at what point the pain changed to a pleasant sensation. Waking up in the morning, the brunette found himself completely clean. The boy figured Kale had wiped him down. Remembering the events of last night, Hajin sighed heavily and thought about Kale getting rid of Jawan as soon as possible. The guy's thoughts were interrupted by Shinu's question about whether the brunette had been busy yesterday. His friend informed him that he had come running here without having breakfast, and Hajin hadn't even picked up the phone. The brunette lied about going to bed early. Shinu noticed the hickeys on the guy's neck, muttering quietly that they weren't there when Hajin was at his house. Hajin started his story, which surprised Shinu very much. The brunette asked his friend to keep his voice down and said that he had reported the stalker to the police, and after Jawan broke into his house, the brunette slept over at Shinu's place. The guy decided not to tell his friend about being on the bridge. Shinu was disturbed after the brunette's words. He stated that Hajin should have told him everything right away. Clutching the cup in his hand, the brunette felt a twinge of guilt as he remembered how ever since high school Shinu had helped him. Hajin felt obligated to his friend, not daring to burden him with his problems unnecessarily. Shinu checked with Hajin to see if his friend's new place was safe, offering to stay with him temporarily. But the brunette assured him that he was staying with an acquaintance, so it was fine. After clarifying which acquaintance he was referring to, Hajin replied that Shinu didn't know him, the friend concerned by the brunette's words, wondering if the guy would introduce them. Hajin replied doubtfully, clarifying that his acquaintance was a bit strange, which flustered Sheena even more. The brunette smiling awkwardly, unsure of what to say to his friend. A familiar voice was heard nearby that wasn't supposed to be here. Much to Hajin's surprise, silencing him, the boy turned around and saw Kale with a candy in his mouth. Angel wondered if it was about him. Jumping up from his seat, the brunette asked fearfully how the man knew of his location. The blonde pointed to his wrist, reminding the guy of the tattoo. Seeing the marks on Hajin's neck, Kale gently adjusted the collar of the guy's shirt, informing him that he was trying not to leave marks. But it didn't work. The man couldn't control himself when he was aroused. Kale's actions confused Sheena, who looked at the man in disbelief. The blonde moved closer to the brunette and quietly asked if his lower back was hurting, which confused and angered Hajin. Shinu rose from his seat and moved closer, asking Kale who he was. The brunette froze fearfully, stammering. He tried to think of an answer, but nothing came to mind. Kale stepped in, introducing himself as the brunette's temporary guardian, extending a hand to Sheen for an introduction, but the latter only gave the blonde a tense look. Ignoring the handshake, Shinu informed Kale that he and Hajin had plans, so they had to leave now. His friend's words really surprised the brunette. Shinu reminded Hajin that they were going to have lunch. The guy couldn't remember them discussing it in any way. The angel looked at his new acquaintance with anger. The blonde reminded Hajin that they were the ones with plans for today, once again causing the brunette to look puzzled. The angel bit into the candy with all his might and informed the guy that his mouth was now bored. Hajin covered the man's mouth with his hand as he reached in his direction, the angel fumbling to complain of fatigue and lack of energy. The brunette was outraged at Kale's behavior. The brunette apologized to Shinu and hesitantly informed him that it seemed he did have an appointment with the man, suggesting that they see each other another time. Not waiting for a response from Shinu, Kale grabbed the brunette's arm and led the way, hurrying him along, Hajin not realizing where he was being led, asking the man to walk slower. Pushing the brunette against the wall, Kale pounced on him with a kiss that took the boy's breath away. The man enjoyed the closeness with Hajin for a long time before informing him that he was alive again. Covering his eyes, the blonde asked the guy for another kiss. The brunette covered the man's lips with his hands, warning him not to come to the university without calling. The man deceived the guy, informing him that he came because of the stalker. However, Hajin believed him, but asked him to still call in advance. The angel agreed and asked the brunette not to spoil the atmosphere. Angel approached the boy again for a kiss. The brunette tried to resist, but the man grabbed his hands firmly, giving him no chance to move away. The brunette clamped his eyes shut, waiting for the kiss. Suddenly, the grip loosened, and the man laughed softly, offering to eat first. The brunette, not expecting such behavior from Kale, froze in place with a feeling of shame. Spreading his wings, the angel turned to the guy, saying he had gotten a good look at him yesterday and advised him to eat more. The brunette embarrassedly asked the man not to talk about it. Grinning, the man asked about why he shouldn't say that. Flying to follow the brunette, the angel happily informed him that he had a lot of strength now. It seemed to Hajin as if Kale's wings had lightened. The brunette looked worriedly at the phone. The man asked him if he was expecting a call from his friend, but Hajin replied that Jawan hadn't called him again after that incident. The boy checked with the man to see if he had dealt with Jawan. The blonde assured Hajin that he didn't even know what the man looked like yet. The brunette looked at the phone once more and felt a growing unease. Hajin decided to ask Kale when and how he was going to deal with his stalker, reminding him that he had paid the man a considerable price to do so. The man didn't give an exact answer. He even felt sorry for the guy. But the blonde man had to live somehow too. The angel shared the information that it would take a lot of work to take the man out. Angel reminded him that it hadn't even been a week since they'd met, so strength wasn't enough yet. The brunette was surprised by that fact, terrified of what would happen if Jawan showed up unexpectedly. The man suggested that the boy call him at the end of class so the blonde could come get him, then kissed the brunette's wrist and reminded him that Kale's whereabouts could be found on his own. The boy, embarrassed by the man's suggestion, pulled his hand out of his grip and said that Kale might not come at all. The angel said he would help deal with Jawan anyway, but with a certain condition, touching Hajin's lips and pressing lightly, forcing the boy to open his mouth. The man asked for permission to kiss the brunette once a day. Hajin bit the blonde's hand with all the anger he could muster, reminding him of his warning not to touch him whenever he wanted. Embarrassed, the brunette reminded him that they already kissed every day. The boy almost agreed to the condition, as the man suddenly stated that there was one more. Hajin was slightly surprised, reminding the angel that he had originally only spoken of one condition. In all seriousness, Kale demanded that any touching of Hajin with Shinu be eliminated, much to the brunette's dismay, as he tried to prove that he was just his friend. Kale remembered Shinu's face as if he had marked Hajin, not intending to give him to anyone. But as long as the contract was in effect, the angel considered the brunette his own and didn't want anyone to touch him. The blonde man was pulled out of his thoughts by Hajin, who was trying to convey to the man that Shinu was just his friend and nothing more. With a single tug, Kale pulled the boy towards him, forcing him to fall into his lap. The blonde informed him that he remembered one more thing about the condition. The brunette resented it, reminding him that there were already two. The man said that another stipulation would be mandatory intimacy every day to use it to get the energy that the angel needed to use his powers. The brunette bit the blonde's shoulder, saying that at this rate the man would catch him before Jawan did, Kale shouting slightly, saying that he really needed this badly. After briefly thinking about it, Hajin gave his verdict that twice a week would be enough, causing the blonde to blush and ask the guy about wanting to do it right now. The brunette called the angel a pervert and recalled that they had just had intimacy yesterday. The man clarified if there was one more time left before the end of the week, but the guy was adamant. The blonde asked Hajin about Jawan's appearance, asking about the picture, to which the brunette hesitated slightly. There was a hooded stranger standing outside the building where the boys were. Hajin sat in a lecture at the university, pensively looking at the heavy rain outside the window. The guy remembered that he forgot to bring an umbrella. According to the established rules, Hajin kisses Kale every day and at times sleeps with the man. Thus, several weeks passed. The brunette worried about whether everything would be all right. The brunette thought Angel would make a fuss, saying that intimacy twice a week wasn't enough. The guy was glad that the blonde was defending him. However, there was one problem. Hajin tensed when the man returned in the evening with marks on his neck. The brunette thought it was none of his business, but Kale himself had forbidden him to come into contact with anyone. The guy was angered by the fact that the man was allowed to do anything. It pissed him off that the man could tumble around with everyone. But either way, Hajin was forced to continue sleeping with the blonde. The brunette wasn't happy about this arrangement, so he hoped the man would deal with Jawan as quickly as possible. The guy threw a glance at his phone and froze in fear. Shinu sent messages to Hajin asking for a meeting, which went unanswered. The guy was standing outside with an umbrella when he suddenly noticed his friend and called out to him. The brunette hadn't expected to meet his friend, so he was a little surprised. Shinu clarified how the brunette had gotten home that day, wondering if nothing had happened. Hajin didn't understand what day the guy was talking about. Shinu explained that he was referring to the day he was suddenly taken away by some guy. The brunette only brushed it off, replying for his friend not to worry about it. Looking at his phone, Hajin informed him that he was running late and waved goodbye to Shin and ran away. The blonde man's phone received return messages from the brunette. Shinu wanted to ask if the brunette had a meeting with that guy scheduled for today, but after a brief thought, he erased the typed message and looked up to wonder if Hajin had an umbrella. The man didn't understand why it was raining so hard, suggesting that the sky was probably torn up. Hajin wrote that he was finishing at 3. The guy never answered the question about whether he had an umbrella with him. Kale didn't understand why Hajin hadn't responded to his message in over an hour. Suddenly, the blonde saw Sheena addressing the angel with an emphasis on the word guardian. Angel asked Shinu if he had come here for Hajin, clarifying that the brunette hadn't warned him about it. Shinu picked up on the guy's closeness, asking why they were so informal in talking to each other. The blonde calmly replied that Shinu could say that too. The guy asked Kale how long he had known Hajin. The angel clarified why he wanted that information. The man, referring to the fact that the brunette was Shinu's friend, recommended asking Hajin directly. The guy clenched his fists in anger, asking if Hajin was currently staying with him, replying that Shinu should also ask Hajin that. The blonde waved goodbye and walked forward as a phone call suddenly rang. Kale reporting that he was in front of the building. The blonde man worriedly wondered why the brunette was breathing so heavily. The man wondered if the guy had an umbrella and why he hadn't read his messages. But the call cut off, leaving Kale unanswered. The brunette lashed out at the blonde, accusing the man of taking his soul and promising to help. Hajin yelled that Jahuan was aware of his new location. Hajin relayed Jahuan's words to the man about finding the guy. The brunette, losing control of himself, screamed, asking the angel how he should be now and what to do. Shinu looked sadly at his friend, Hajin, at a complete loss, clarified with the angel how many more souls he had to give him. The man tried to calm the brunette down. Suddenly, Hajin pounced on the man, hugging him tightly around the neck and kissed him confidently. The blonde man, not expecting such an action from the guy, opened his eyes wide. Shinu froze in shock at what he saw. The brunette continued to kiss the man while he didn't realize what had happened to the guy. The blonde pushed Hajin away from him, trying to bring him to consciousness, warning him of their being near the uni. The brunette, with tears in his eyes, asked the blonde to take his soul as quickly as possible, admitting that he was very scared. The angel pressed Hajin against him, telling him to calm down first. Hajin covered his eyes and continued to cry in the man's arms. Shinu, seeing everything that was happening, turned around and silently went the other way, leaving the guys alone. After showering, Kale sent Hajin to his room, citing that it was much larger than the room the brunette had slept in. The boy retorted lethargically that he could go back to his room. The guy realized what he had done right outside the university and thought that he had obviously really lost his mind. Hajin knew exactly how things could have ended if he had been caught. The brunette was scared when he saw Jawan's message. That's why he was so careless. Hajin didn't understand why the stalker continued to harass him if he had no more reason to taunt him. Jawan knew perfectly well that Hajin had no money, and other reasons were incomprehensible to the lad. Kale entered the room, who, calling the brunette a crybaby, asked if he was hungry. The brunette objected that he wasn't a crybaby. However, the man let that pass and checked with the guy to see if he had calmed down. Hajin thanked the man for his concern. Kale sat down on the bed with the guy and told him that all he did was go to give the umbrella away and ended up getting all wet. The angel touching Hajin's face and informing him that it turns out he wasn't thinking at all when he was out of it. The blonde remembered how the guy had tried to jump off the bridge and now kissed him, asking him to take his soul. The brunette, starting to cry, said he was scared so there was nothing he could do. Angel was only going to take a soul to sustain his own life force. But looking at the brunette's distraught face, the man realized that it was simply illegal to construct such an expression. Kale asked Hajin not to cry anymore, then promised to start searching for Jawan starting tomorrow. Not holding back, the man once again asked the brunette if he and Shinu were definitely friends. The brunette gave an affirmative answer, asking why the man wanted this information. The angel decided not to answer, thinking about the fact that probably every friend had secrets, even from those closest to them. Getting out of bed, the man stroked the boy's head and told him to go out to eat if he had the desire, otherwise recommended that the brunette go to bed. As he was about to leave, the man froze at the guy's question about whether he was going out with the others again. Surprised, the blonde turned to the brunette, expecting the latter to explain his words. The guy reported that he was aware that the man was spending time with someone else. The brunette understood that it was none of his business what the angel was doing outside the house. However, it bothered him. Hajin reminded the man of his words about his friends touching him and clarified if the blonde had the same conditions. Kale asked the brunette if he was in a position to charge him such a thing. Guy pointed to his wrist and said that Angel had signed the contract, asking Angel if the reason for this behavior was because Hajin only allowed intimacy twice a week. The man couldn't deny the obvious, but by telling the guy the truth, Kale was afraid of becoming a complete asshole in the brunette's eyes. The Angel froze in utter shock after Hajin's words about what he could more often than not. Placing the mug on the table, the brunette clarified if 3 or 4 times would be enough. Hajin was willing to agree to any conditions on the blonde's part to end this relationship as soon as possible. Kale objected that he could catch Jawan without that, but the boy explained that he was not comfortable sleeping with a man after his adventures, who didn't even try to hide the traces of his connection to someone else. The boy also made the argument that this way the Angel would gain strength faster and use it to capture Jawan. The brunette thought he'd rather give far more of his soul. The blonde man, clutching his head, didn't know if he should admit that with the intimacy the man wasn't taking the guy's soul. He was just satisfying his own needs. The man decided that he would receive his soul to eventually fulfill the guy's request. But no more than that. Kale informed Hajin that he would only agree to intimacy with him, however with the condition that he would decide when. The brunette agreed to the man's condition without hesitation. Kale wondered what they should do if the blonde wanted intimacy tonight. But because of Hanjin, he hadn't had a chance to go out. Blushing slightly, the boy clarified with the man if he wanted to do what he had promised him right now. The blonde climbed onto the bed and positioned himself next to the brunette, who gently kaled to him and kissed him. The man continued kissing the boy's body, paying special attention to the most sensitive places. The brunette's appearance aroused Kale, who found it increasingly difficult to restrain himself. Angel enjoyed intimacy with the guy, discovering new facets of how to receive and give pleasure to his partner. Having finished having fun, the man asked the guy if he wanted to have a bath together. The boy warned the man that he was aware of his desire to continue doing stuff while they bathed. Kale promised that they were done for the day and advised Hajin to head to the shower. Embarrassed, the brunette lightly hit the man with a pillow. Kale took the hint and went into the shower first. Hajin stated that he would wait for the blonde to come in before heading to the bathroom as well. After the man left, Hajin wondered if he had done the right thing. The guy realized that he had enjoyed himself, and so far everything was going well. However, the desire for it all to end never faded in him. After a hard day, the guy started to feel dizzy. The brunette decided to lie down until Kale came, getting comfortable on the bed. A message from an unknown sender arrived on Hajin's phone. Coughing slightly, the Angel stated that the guy was too much trouble. Hajin laying under a blanket with a cold, hinting to Kale that it was his fault. The man was angered by the guy's accusations, and he reminded Hajin how he had gone out in the rain without an umbrella and had himself asked Kale to have an intimate relationship only with him. Frowning, the boy admitted that it was indeed his fault. Settling comfortably on the pillow, the brunette advised Kale to find a stalker quickly so that this wouldn't happen again. Kale remarked that the guy was obviously bursting with happiness when his stalker disappeared. The brunette agreed with the Angel's statement, adding that this was what he was trying for. Angel clarified with the guy if he was aware that the man would be able to find him in case Hajin decided to run away. The brunette, falling asleep, clarified about the termination of the contract. The man thought about the fact that no one had talked about ending the contract. After all, the guy was his life. The blonde wondered if the brunette thought the Angel would let him go so easily. Touching the sleeping boy's forehead, the man noted that he had a fever. Hajin mumbled in his sleep about being cold. Kale realized that he didn't have any medicine at home. The man went to get his medicine, noting that it had rained yesterday, as if the sky had been pierced and today was very sunny. The Angel didn't understand how anyone could get sick because of the closeness after the rain. Kale thought about the fact that the guy's body was too weak. The man remembered the guy's behavior yesterday and didn't understand how scary it must be to be so desperate. Angel was slightly perturbed that the guy didn't even know how valuable his soul was. The man couldn't understand how the brunette had turned his tongue to tell him to take as much of his soul as he wanted. Deciding that Hajin should be given medicine first, the man, who had never been to a pharmacy before, started looking up the address on his phone, when suddenly a guy flew past him, hitting the blonde man hard with his shoulder. The blonde frowned unhappily, shouting after the stranger to apologize if he ran into him. But the guy didn't say anything and moved on. With a heavy sigh, the man picked up the broken phone, resenting the young people now. The guy left the pharmacy and looked at the bag of drugs, wondering if he had bought too much. While in the pharmacy, the blonde asked for something for colds, and then asked the pharmacist if a person could become so bad from severe overstrain that he could not get out of bed. Having received a positive answer, Kale took many different medicines, after which the pharmacy worker could not understand what this man was doing if he needed all these remedies. The man thought about what he was doing all for Hajin, however. For the sake of saving his own life, the blonde saw no choice but to stick with the brunette. Seeing a stranger near his house who was carefully studying something, the man recognized him as the rude man who pushed him and decided to pass by. Suddenly, a conversation with Hajin surfaced in Kale's mind, where he had described Jawan as someone who had the corners of his eyes raised, so that he always looked angry and had a scar on his eyebrow. Taking a closer look at the stranger, the blonde realized that this was the stalker. The man realized that the guy really wasn't lying when he said Jawan knew about his new home. Now, Kale was not at all surprised at how much Hajin was tired of all this. The man turned to the stranger, clarifying if the blonde had recently encountered him. Angel showed Jawan his shattered phone, telling him that it had fallen and shattered on impact. But the guy reported that it wasn't him. The man listed the characteristics of Jawan's appearance before asking who Kale was. The blonde man smirked and interrupted the guy and offered to talk about compensation. The boy was outraged at being dragged somewhere. Suddenly, the blonde man addressed him by name. Jawan's eyes widened in fear, and he backed away from the man. The blonde man assumed from the look on the guy's face that he had a question about how the man knew his name. Kale cautiously approached Jawan and squatted down, ordering him to stop following Hajin. The man just wanted to scare the guy, so he informed him that Hajin, that naive kid, was sick and feeling bad because of him. But Jawan, shifting to shouting, called Kale a jerk. Jawan didn't understand where Hajin was being naive. The guy, disgusted, asked the man if he was gay too. The man couldn't help himself and closed the guy's mouth, rudely asking who allowed him to open his mouth. Back in his apartment, Kale remembered his conversation with Jawan. The man had told the guy that after Hajin hit his vase, he should have backed off. The blonde didn't understand what the guy wanted to accomplish with this pursuit. Jawan didn't understand where this man got so much power from. Kale informed him that he had originally just wanted to scare the guy. The boy tried to kick, but it was to no avail. The man admitted that he was getting something from Hajin and that he would have no trouble getting rid of Jawan. Kale wished he could do something else, so he decided to ask the guy nicely to stop looming in front of Hajin. And without letting his hand go from Jawan's mouth, the blonde asked once more if he understood everything. Breaking free of the blonde's grip, Jawan slapped him on the arm and called him a sick bastard. The angel, angry, took the guy by the hair and repeated that he had spoken to him nicely. Kale decided to find out what Hajin had done to Jawan that caused him to bully the brunette. The man slapped the guy a couple times on the cheek, which made him angry and pushed the blonde with all his might, ordering him to let go. Jawan asked the angel again who he was and what he knew about Hajin. Kale admitted that he knew nothing about the guy and didn't want to find out, helping the brunette for the reason that he got something in return. After a brief struggle, Kale ordered Jawan to forget where Hajin lived and cut all ties with him, forgetting the brunette's existence, adding that the boy should forget about the man himself. The boy asked the man not to make him laugh, however. After looking into the blonde man's enraged eyes, Jawan fell unconscious. Kale gave the boy one last kick, noting that there was nothing special about him. The man realized that all Jawan could do was yell. After thinking over what had happened, the blonde decided that the guy would probably stop chasing the brunette now.